The year was 6847 CE. In the cold darkness of space, Earth's sun still burned bright, casting its light across 12 star systems that humanity called home. For 4,000 years, humans had not fired a single weapon in anger. For 4,000 years, they had lived in peace. The Galactic Council called them the Silent Gardeners. 47 different species sat in the Great Hall of the Council, discussing trade and treaties, settling disputes and drawing boundaries. But humans rarely attended. They kept to themselves, tending their worlds like careful farmers tending precious crops. Ambassador Sarah Chen was one of the few humans who walked among the stars regularly. She was tall and thin, with gray hair pulled back from her face. Her eyes were dark and patient. She had spent 30 years speaking for humanity to species that did not understand them. On this day, she stood in the council chamber on the station called Unity's Hope. The chamber was a massive sphere with seats rising in rings all around. Light came from panels that mimicked each species' home star. The air smelled of 1,000 different worlds. A Zetharian commander stood across from her. The Zetharians were warriors. Their empire stretched across 80 systems. They had scales like ancient Earth reptiles, and their eyes glowed red in the dim light. They believed that strength was the only truth in the universe. The commander's name was Vexthor. He wore armor that reflected light like oil on water. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough. He was speaking now to the entire council. The humans hide behind their shields, he said. They do not trade. They do not share their knowledge. They sit in their gardens and watch the galaxy move without them. What kind of civilization is this? Sarah did not respond immediately. She had learned patience over many years. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. We share what we can, she said. We help where we are asked. But we do not interfere. We chose this path long ago. Vexthor laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You chose weakness. You forgot how to fight. You are soft creatures who hide from the real galaxy. Other council members watched this exchange. Some agreed with the Zetharian. Some did not. But none of them truly understood humanity. They saw a peaceful species and assumed peace meant weakness. They did not know the history. Sarah knew the history. Every human knew it. It was taught to children as soon as they could understand. In the year 2847, humanity had nearly destroyed itself. The ash wars had burned across Earth in the first colonies. Billions had died. Cities had turned to glass. Oceans had boiled. When the wars finally ended, the survivors had gathered. They had looked at what they had done to themselves. They had made a choice. No more war. No more violence. They would become something better. It had not been easy. But humans had kept their promise. They had built a civilization based on art and science and philosophy. They had pushed out to the stars, but they had done it carefully, peacefully. They had created shields around their systems, not to hide, but to protect a way of life. Sarah looked at Vexthor now. She saw his confidence. She saw his contempt. She wondered if she should tell him the truth. She wondered if she should explain that humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. But she said nothing. There was no point. The Zetharians would not understand until they were forced to understand. The council session ended. Sarah returned to her quarters on the station. She sent her daily report back to Earth. Everything was as it had been. The long peace continued. But in the dark between the stars, something was already in motion. A Zetharian survey ship had found something interesting. A human colony vessel, small and unprotected, traveling between systems. The ship was full of families. Most importantly, it was full of children. The Zetharian captain looked at his screens and made a decision. He sent a message to his emperor. He asked for orders. The response came quickly. Take them, study them. See if human genetics could be useful. The Zetharians did not think this would matter. They did not think the Silent Gardeners would do anything about it. After all, humans were peaceful. They had been peaceful for 4,000 years. They were about to learn the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. The colony ship was called the New Dawn. It was not large or impressive. It did not carry weapons. It carried 300 children, along with their teachers and caretakers. They were traveling to a newly terraformed world in the outer reaches of human space. The children ranged from 4 years old to 16. They laughed and played in the ship's common areas. They studied in classrooms with windows that looked out at the stars. They were excited about their new home, a green world with clear oceans and clean air. Captain Maria Torres sat in her command chair and watched the navigation displays. She had made this journey twice before. It was safe and simple. 3 more days and they would arrive. 3 more days and the children would see their new home. The alarm came without warning. Torres sat up straight as red lights flashed across her screens. A ship had dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. A big ship. A military ship. Zetharian vessel, her navigator said, his voice tight with fear. Torres's hands moved quickly across her controls. She sent out a distress call. She tried to change course, but the new dawn was slow and the Zetharian ship was very fast. A voice came through the communication system. It was harsh and metallic. Human vessel, cut your engines. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in destruction. Torres looked at her crew. They were civilian navigators and engineers. They had no weapons. They had no training for this. She made the only choice she could. She cut the engines. The Zetharian soldiers came through the airlocks like a dark flood. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that hummed with power. They moved through the ship quickly, efficiently. They herded the crew into the cargo bay. They gathered all the children together. The children cried. The younger ones did not understand what was happening. The older ones tried to be brave, but fear showed in their eyes. The teachers held them close, trying to comfort them, trying to protect them. A Zetharian commander walked among them. His scales were deep purple, almost black. His eyes glowed in the dim light. He stopped in front of Captain Torres. "The children will come with us," he said. "You will return home and tell your people this. The strong take what they need. The weak accept what they are given." "You cannot do this," Torres said, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "They are children. They have done nothing to you." "They have what we need," the commander replied. "Human genetics are unique. Your adaptability is valuable. These young ones will help us create better soldiers. You should be honored." Torres lunged at him, but Zetharian soldiers grabbed her. They held her as she struggled. She watched helplessly as the children were taken away. She heard their cries echoing through the corridors. She felt something break inside her chest. The Zetharians left the crew alive. They took the children and disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Torres managed to send one more message before her communication system failed. It was brief. It contained everything that mattered. The children were gone. On Earth, in the halls of human government, the message arrived like thunder. For the first time in 4,000 years, humans had been attacked. For the first time in 4,000 years, human children had been taken by force. Ambassador Sarah Chen received the news in her quarters on Unity's Hope. She read the message 3 times. Her hands did not shake. Her face did not change, but something shifted behind her eyes, something cold and ancient. She walked to the council chamber immediately. She did not request a formal session. She simply walked to the center of the great sphere and waited. The other ambassadors gathered, curious about this unusual behavior. When they were assembled, Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, but every word cut like a blade. 300 human children have been taken by the Zetharian Empire. They were taken from a civilian colony ship in neutral space. This is an act of war. The council chamber erupted in noise. Species shouted at each other. Some demanded proof. Some expressed sympathy. Some remained silent. Vexthor stood among the Zetharian delegation. He did not look surprised. He did not look concerned. "The human makes serious accusations," he said. "We know nothing of this incident. Perhaps it was pirates. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding." Sarah turned to face him. "Return the children within 3 solar rotations. If you do not, you will remember why humanity chose peace." Vexthor laughed. Other council members shifted uncomfortably. They knew the Zetharians had military power. They knew humans had none. The threat sounded empty. Sarah Chen walked out of the chamber. She sent one message to Earth. It was just 2 words. They refused. The council waited for humanity's response. They expected diplomatic protests. They expected appeals for help. They expected nothing to change. They had no idea what was coming. The human conclave met within 6 hours of Sarah Chen's message. Representatives from all 12 star systems gathered on Earth, in a chamber deep beneath the surface where the first peace accords had been signed 4,000 years ago. The chamber was circular, with walls made of polished stone. Names were carved into those walls. Billions of names. Every person who had died in the Ash Wars. The humans who entered this place never forgot what war meant. They never forgot what they had promised to leave behind. But today the chamber felt different. Today anger filled the air like electricity before a storm. A woman stood at the center of the circle. Her name was Administrator Chen Li, and she led Earth's government. She was old, nearly 200 years, kept alive by medical science but showing every year in her face. "They have taken our children," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. "The Council has refused to help. The Zytharians have denied responsibility. We stand alone. Then we get them back ourselves," said a man from the Mars colonies. His hands were clenched into fists. "With what?" another delegate asked. "We have no military. We have no weapons. We have not trained soldiers in 4,000 years. Chen Li raised her hand. Silence fell. She touched a control panel and the chamber's walls changed. Images appeared. Ships, weapons, vast installations hidden in dark space far from any star. "We have Project Vigil," she said. Gasps filled the chamber. Most of the delegates had never heard of Project Vigil. It was a secret kept by a handful of families across generations. A promise made at the end of the Ash Wars. Humanity would pursue peace, but humanity would not be defenseless. General Marcus Rivera stepped forward. He wore civilian clothes, but he moved like a soldier. His family had maintained Project Vigil for 200 years. His grandmother had served before him. Her grandfather before her. Back and back through the generations. "We have 50,000 warships," he said. "They are maintained by automated systems in hidden stations. They use technology we developed during the last days of the Ash Wars and have continued to improve in secret. They are more advanced than anything the Galactic Council has ever seen." "Why?" someone asked. "Why build all this if we were committed to peace?" Rivera's expression was grim. "Because choosing peace is not the same as being unable to defend yourself. Because we knew someday someone might force our hand. Because we remembered what our ancestors said. We will never start a war, but we will always be able to end one." The chamber was silent. Delegates looked at the images on the walls. Ships that looked like predators. Weapons that could crack planets. Technology that had been perfected in silence for 4,000 years. "We must vote," Chen Li said, "to activate Project Vigil, to bring our children home, to remind the galaxy that humanity chose peace but has not forgotten war." The vote was unanimous. Not a single delegate voted against it. They looked at the names carved on the walls. They thought of 300 children crying in some alien laboratory. They made their choice. Across human space, lights began to turn on. Stations that had drifted in darkness for generations came alive. Shipyards stirred. Automated systems that had waited patiently for 4,000 years received their activation codes. Rivera stood in the command center of a hidden station. Around him, humans who had trained in secret all their lives took their positions. They had studied old tactics. They had practiced on simulators. They had hoped this day would never come, but they were ready. On worlds across human space, factories changed their production. Art studios became weapon workshops. Scientists who had spent their lives studying poetry and philosophy now opened old files. They remembered formulas their ancestors had written. They remembered the science of destruction. The transformation took 72 hours. Human space changed from a garden into a fortress. Citizens volunteered, not because they wanted war, but because they wanted their children back. The Galactic Council monitored human communications. They saw the activity. They saw the energy signatures. They began to understand that something was wrong. Their intelligence agencies sent urgent messages. The humans were mobilizing. The humans had weapons. The humans had a military. In the council chamber, delegates gathered in emergency session. They demanded explanations. They sent messages to human space. They received only one reply. It came from Sarah Chen. She stood once again at the center of the great sphere. But this time she wore the uniform of a human ambassador at war. It was simple and gray with no decorations. But everyone who saw it felt cold. "We asked for our children," she said. "You refused." The Zytharians denied responsibility. The council chose to do nothing. So humanity will act alone. We will retrieve our children. Anyone who stands in our way will be removed. This is not a threat. This is a statement of fact. She paused, looking around at the assembled species. You saw our piece and assumed it meant weakness. You forgot that we chose this path. Choice implies the ability to choose otherwise. Today we make a different choice. The silent gardeners are silent no more. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in chaos, but it was too late. In dark space, 50,000 human warships powered up their engines. They calculated trajectories. They locked onto Zetharian military installations. The storm was coming. The human fleet appeared at 27 Zetharian military installations simultaneously. One moment the space around these bases was empty. The next moment it was filled with ships. Zetharian commanders stared at their sensors in disbelief. Human vessels surrounded their stations, their fortresses, their shipyards. The ships were angular and dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for machines their size. On the border world of Kethris Prime, alarms screamed. This was where intelligence suggested the children were held. This was where the largest research facility operated. This was where the Zetharians conducted their genetic experiments. The facility's commander, a veteran named Kalsoon, watched human ships position themselves around his station. He activated his weapons. He called for reinforcements. He prepared for battle. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Beams of concentrated energy carved through Zetharian shields like they were not there. Missiles that moved faster than sensors could track struck with perfect accuracy. Within minutes, every weapon system on the station was destroyed, but the station itself remained intact. The humans were precise. They eliminated threats without causing unnecessary destruction. They fought like surgeons, not butchers. Commander Wei Zhang led the assault team that boarded the research facility. She was young for her rank, barely 30, but her family had trained for this role for generations. She had studied tactics that were 4,000 years old. She had practiced in simulators that recreated ancient battles. Now she moved through the corridors of an alien station with 50 soldiers behind her. They wore armor that made them nearly invisible. They carried weapons that could stun or kill depending on the need. They communicated without speaking, through implants that connected their minds. Zetharian guards tried to stop them. The guards were experienced warriors. They had fought in a dozen conflicts across the galaxy, but they had never faced humans in combat before. The humans moved like water flowing around obstacles, striking from unexpected angles. They used non-lethal weapons when possible. When not possible, they struck with efficient brutality. Within an hour, Zhang's team had reached the research level. She found the children in a large laboratory. They were in medical pods, sedated but alive. Human doctors moved through the lab immediately, checking vital signs, disconnecting alien equipment. Zhang stood guard while they worked. A Zetharian scientist tried to destroy his data. Zhang stopped him with a single shot that paralyzed his nervous system. She grabbed the alien by his collar and lifted him to look into his eyes. "What were you doing to them?" she demanded. The scientist, Dr. Velkoth, struggled to speak. The paralysis was wearing off. "Studying them. Their DNA, your species adapts so quickly. We wanted to understand how. We wanted to create soldiers who could do the same." "They are children," Zhang said. Her voice was cold. "Not laboratory animals. We never harmed them permanently," Velkoth said. "The experiments were harmless. Just tests. Just samples." Zhang looked at the children sleeping in their pods. Some of them had bandages. Some of them had strange marks on their skin. She felt rage building in her chest, but she controlled it. She was a soldier. She had a mission. "You will testify to what you did here," she told the scientist. "You will tell the galaxy what the Zetharian Empire does to children, and then you will spend the rest of your life regretting this day." The evacuation took 3 hours. Every child was examined, treated, and carried to human ships. They began to wake during the journey. Some cried. Some were silent. All of them were traumatized. Zhang stayed with them as long as she could. She held crying children and told them they were safe now. She promised them they were going home. But she knew the scars from this would last far longer than any physical injury. While the rescue operation proceeded, General Rivera commanded the human fleet in the largest space battle in 4,000 years. The Zetharian Defense Armada arrived in force. 300 warships, battle-tested and heavily armed. Emperor Vexthor himself commanded from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Fang. He watched the human ships and felt confident. Yes, they had surprised him. Yes, they had better technology than expected. But numbers mattered. Experience mattered. The Zetharians had been warriors for 10,000 years. The battle began. Zetharian ships opened fire with everything they had. Space lit up with energy beams and explosions. For a moment, it seemed like a real fight. Then the humans responded. Their weapons were beyond anything the Zetharians had encountered. Kinetic projectiles that struck at relativistic speeds, hitting with the force of nuclear weapons. Quantum disruptors that caused ships to simply cease functioning. Swarm missiles controlled by artificial intelligence that could not be fooled or evaded. But worse than the weapons was the coordination. Human ships moved like a single organism. They anticipated Zetharian tactics before they were executed. They struck at weak points with perfect timing. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The Eternal Fang's shields collapsed in minutes. Its weapon systems were destroyed seconds later. Vex Thor sat in his command chair watching his fleet being dismantled around him. He had commanded warriors his entire life. He had won battles across the galaxy. Now he felt helpless. A human voice came through his communications system. It was General Rivera, Emperor Vex Thor. You are defeated. Surrender your fleet or we will destroy it. You have 30 seconds to decide. Vex Thor looked at his tactical displays. 90% of his fleet was disabled or destroyed. The humans had not lost a single ship, not one. In 14 hours of combat, humanity had proven what 4,000 years of peace had hidden. They had never forgotten how to fight. They had only chosen not to. Vex Thor signaled his surrender. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours of the battle's end. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the sphere once more. She looked tired. The past days had aged her, but her voice was steady when she spoke. The children have been recovered, she said. They are being treated for their trauma. The Zetharian research facility has been destroyed. Emperor Vex Thor is in human custody. A delegate from the Karathi Federation stood. The Karathi were insect-like beings, logical and precise. Ambassador Chen, the Council demands that humanity cease all hostile actions immediately. What you have done constitutes an act of war. Chen looked at the Karathi delegate without expression. What we have done constitutes a rescue operation. The Zetharians committed an act of war when they abducted our children. We responded. The Council could have resolved this diplomatically, another delegate said. The Council refused to act, Chen replied. Her voice grew colder. We came to you. We asked for help. We gave you 3 days to return our children. You did nothing, so we did what was necessary. The chamber erupted in argument. Some species supported humanity. Many did not. They were afraid. They had seen what human weapons could do. They had watched the Zetharian fleet, one of the most powerful in the galaxy, destroyed in 14 hours. Chen waited for silence. When it came, she continued. Humanity has demands. First, the Zetharian Empire will pay full reparations for what was done to our children. Second, everyone involved in the abduction and experimentation will face trial. Third, the Council will reform its laws to protect civilian populations of all species. And if the Council refuses? Someone asked. Chen's answer was simple. Then humanity will enforce these terms ourselves. We sought peace. We were forced to war. We will not make that mistake again. From this day forward, any species that target civilians will answer to us. The session ended in chaos. But over the following weeks, Chen's demands were met. The Council had no choice. 3 species that had voted against helping humanity found themselves facing economic sanctions. Their trade routes were blocked. Their diplomatic communications were monitored. They learned quickly that the silent gardeners, once awakened, were not easily ignored. Commander Wei Jiang spent her days at a rehabilitation facility on Earth. The rescued children lived there, receiving treatment for their physical and psychological wounds. Jiang visited them every day. She felt responsible for them, though she knew she could not heal what had been done. One evening, a girl named Maya approached her. Maya was 14, old enough to understand what had happened. She had been one of the first children taken. Commander, Maya said, did we start a war? Is it our fault? Jiang knelt down to look Maya in the eyes. No, she said firmly. You did nothing wrong. The Zetharians started this. We ended it. That is all. But people died, Maya said. Zetharian soldiers died to rescue us. Zhang nodded slowly. Yes, they did. War always has a cost. That is why we avoided it for so long. But some things are worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, are we still peaceful? Are humans still the same? Zhang thought about this carefully. We are the same, she said finally. We still value peace. We still believe in it. But now the galaxy knows that our peace is a choice, not a weakness. Sometimes that makes all the difference. The trial of Emperor Vexthor was broadcast across the galaxy. He stood in a human courtroom, stripped of his armor and his authority. For days, evidence was presented. The recordings from the research facility, the testimony of the scientists, the medical reports on the children. Vexthor maintained his dignity throughout. When asked if he had anything to say, he stood tall. I did what I believed was best for my people, he said. I saw humans as weak. I was wrong. I accept the consequences of my error. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, not on a harsh penal colony, but in a facility where he would witness the rebuilding of everything his actions had destroyed. He would see human children grow up healthy and free. He would watch as the Zetharian Empire reformed under new leadership. He would live with the knowledge of what his mistake had cost. As the trial concluded, evidence emerged that shocked the galaxy. The Zetharian abduction was not unique. Over the past century, 47 other species had suffered similar incidents. Children taken, adults disappeared, small colonies that vanished without explanation. The Council had known. Files were discovered. Reports had been filed. Complaints had been lodged. But the Council had done nothing because they feared Zetharian military power. Smaller species, those without powerful fleets, began to approach human ambassadors. They asked for protection. They asked for treaties. They asked humanity to ensure their safety. General Rivera sat in his command center and looked at the requests piling up. He felt the weight of what humanity had become. They had wanted only to be left alone. Now the galaxy was asking them to be guardians. He thought about the soldiers under his command. He thought about the weapons in his fleet. He thought about the 4,000 years of peace that had just ended. Had they made the right choice? Had rescuing 300 children been worth becoming warriors again? He did not know. But he knew they could not go back. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. There was no returning to the quiet gardens of the past. The question now was, what would humanity become? 6 months passed. The galaxy was different now. The Galactic Council operated under new laws. The Chen Doctrine, they called it, named after the ambassador who had forced change. Any species that targeted civilians would face immediate intervention. Any government that abducted children would be held accountable. The Council had teeth now. Real enforcement power, and everyone knew where that power came from. Human ships patrolled the major trade routes. Human observers sat in council sessions. The silent gardeners had become the galaxy's protectors, whether they wanted the role or not. Sarah Chen stood in her quarters on Unity's Hope and looked out at the stars. She was older now. The stress of the past months had aged her more than years should have. But she had accomplished what she set out to do. The children were safe. The laws had changed. Justice had been served, her door chimed. General Rivera entered, also looking worn but satisfied. They had become friends during the crisis. Two people who had never wanted war but had been forced to wage it. I am retiring, Rivera said without preamble. My work is done. Project Vigil has served its purpose. Now it needs new leadership, Chen nodded. She understood. Rivera had carried a heavy burden for a long time. He had maintained weapons he hoped would never be used. Now that they had been used, he needed to step away. What troubles you? She asked. Rivera sat down heavily. How easily we returned to it. War, I mean. 4,000 years of peace, and within 72 hours we were soldiers again. What does that say about us? It says we are human, Chen replied. We are capable of great peace and great violence. We chose peace for a long time. We were forced to choose violence. But we did it to protect children. That matters, does it? We killed thousands of Zetharians. We destroyed their fleet. Yes, we saved the children, but at what cost? Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the cost was our innocence. We can never again claim we are simply peaceful. We can never again hide behind our gardens. But we can choose what we do with this power. We can use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We can ensure that what happened to our children never happens to anyone else's children. Rivera nodded slowly. The Shield Covenant, he said, referring to the mutual defense pact humanity had offered to smaller species. It is a good idea, but it makes us responsible for so much. Responsibility is the price of power, Chen said. Our ancestors learned that lesson in blood. We are learning it again, but hopefully with more wisdom. On a green world at the edge of human space, 300 children walked through gardens. This was the colony they had been traveling to when they were taken. They had finally arrived months late and forever changed. Commander Wei Zhang walked with them. She had requested assignment to this world. She could not change what had happened to these children, but she could help them build new lives. Maya, the 14-year-old who had questioned her months ago, walked beside her. The girl was quieter now, more serious. But she was healing. They all were. We are planting a memorial garden, Maya said, for everyone who was hurt by what happened. For the Zetharian soldiers who died too. Commander, do you think that is wrong? To honor them? Zhang considered this. No, she said. It is not wrong. They were soldiers following orders. They were not the ones who made the evil decision. Honoring the dead, even enemy dead, is a sign of wisdom. What will the plaque say? Zhang asked. Maya pulled out a piece of paper. She had been working on the words for weeks. Here grew the tree that ended the long peace. May its roots remind us that mercy has limits and even the gentlest gardener must sometimes wield the blade. Zhang felt tears in her eyes. These children understood something that many adults did not. Peace and war were not opposites. They were choices. And sometimes the choice to protect the innocent required the willingness to fight. The memorial was completed on the anniversary of the rescue. Representatives from across human space attended. So did delegates from the 47 species that had suffered under Zetharian abductions. So did members of the new Zetharian government, who came to apologize and to learn. The tree was a earth oak, strong and long-lived. Its branches would spread for centuries, a reminder of what had happened here. At its base, the plaque gleamed in the sunlight. Ambassador Chen attended the ceremony. She was retiring too, returning to Earth after a lifetime of service. She stood beneath the growing tree and thought about everything that had changed. Humanity had broken 4,000 years of peace, but they had done it for the right reasons. They had saved their children. They had exposed corruption. They had reformed a broken system. They had reminded the galaxy that peace without the ability to defend it was simply slavery waiting to happen. In orbit above the colony world, human warships kept watch. They would always keep watch now. The gardens were still tended, but they were guarded by soldiers who understood the cost of both peace and war. 50 years later, the galaxy remained at peace. Not the peace of silence and isolation that humanity had practiced before, but a real peace enforced by the Shield Covenant and respected by all species. The Galactic Council was stronger. Smaller species had a voice. Civilian populations were protected. The laws that Sarah Chen had demanded were honored. The tree on the colony world had grown tall and strong. Children played beneath its branches. They learned about the history, about the long peace and the war that ended it. They learned that their ancestors had chosen peace, been forced to war, and then chosen peace again with wisdom. In the halls of human government, a new generation of leaders maintained Project Vigil. The weapons remained ready. The ships stayed armed. The soldiers trained, but they hoped, as their ancestors had hoped, that they would never need to use them because humanity remembered. They remembered the Ash Wars. They remembered the 4,000 years of peace. They remembered 300 children taken in the dark. They remembered what they were capable of, both good and terrible. And because they remembered, the galaxy was safer. Not because humans wanted to rule, not because they sought power, but because they had learned the hardest lesson, that true peace requires both the wisdom to choose it and the strength to defend it. The silent gardeners were silent no more. They watched over the galaxy with patient eyes. They tended their gardens, but they kept their weapons close. They hoped for peace, but they prepared for war, because they had learned what the galaxy now knew. Humanity had chosen peace once. They had been forced to choose otherwise, and they had proven that they would never be forced to make that choice again. The tree grew. The children laughed. The ships watched, and the galaxy remembered.